you did a great workshop with us about a couple of months ago. And tell us, tell us about yourself, first of all, Adrian, and then tell us a little bit about how a church can become net zero and your involvement in that process.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining this evening. It's great to see so many people on board and interested in carbon footprinting for churches. My name's Adrian. I work for a charity called Climate Stewards. Climate Stewards has been around since about 2007, and I've been with them since 2013. I joined Climate Stewards after living in Belgium for 13 years, working with the Belgian Evangelical Mission, and I was pastoring a church down in the Ardennes in a town called Libremont, which is near a town called Bastogne, which probably a lot of you will be familiar with, Battle of the Bulge. As a pastor, the environment and climate change wasn't actually on our agenda. It's not something we talked about in the church, and it's not something that we talked about at Bible college before I became a pastor. And to my regret, it's not something that occurred to me to teach about in the church. So when we moved back to the UK in 2013 and I joined Climate Stewards, my eyes were figuratively opened. And working for Climate Stewards, which is a charity that does carbon offsetting, and we run projects in the developing world to do carbon offsetting. Working for Climate Stewards gave me an opportunity to start working on tools to help other people do their carbon footprints. Mostly we focused on individuals, and those of you who were in the seminar a month or two ago will have seen our individual carbon calculator. And although we've worked with churches individually over the years, we haven't until recently had a tool that would help churches. So in 2017, the Diocese of Leeds created a carbon footprint tool that was to be used by all of their churches. And it was based on a series of Excel spreadsheets that were filled in by different people in the churches and allowed them to work out the carbon emissions from energy, from travel, food, and expenditure. And this was all put into the context of the church's activity. And us down in Climate Stewards, we got to hear about this because Caroline Pomeroy, who's the CEO of Climate Stewards, also happens to be a diocesan environmental officer. So she was kind of in the network and got to hear about what was happening in Leeds. So we had a long chat with the folks up in Leeds about their carbon calculator. And with them, and also with Arosha UK, we started to talk about how we could make that available to more people and also tie it into the whole eco-church journey that many churches in the UK have been embarking on. Can't do a poll or anything, but I'm guessing there's at least a few of you here who will have heard of eco-church. You could probably raise a hand or wave or something. Okay, everyone knows about eco-church. That's brilliant. We've worked with Arosha and also with the Church of England to integrate our carbon calculator for churches with eco-church and also with something called the energy footprinting tool that is part of the Anglican parish returns system. So if you have anything to do with parish returns, you will be aware of the energy footprinting tool that was released late last year. So we talked with them, we made a lot of plans, and this led to the development of a tool that we call 360 Carbon, which is designed to be a collaborative tool. And it's designed for churches to work together on calculating their carbon footprint. And there's particularly an emphasis on collaborative here. So churches across the UK are waking up to the issue of climate or climate change. And often that waking up is driven by members of the congregation rather than being something that's top down. So we want to encourage whole congregations to be involved, to work together, and for the what we might call the keen greenies to have a way to draw other people in. So although practically 360 Carbon could be used by one person in a church and they could gather all of the information that's required, it actually works much better when you work as a team. So what I'm going to do, along with Stefan, is we're gonna have a quick look at the tool. I shall share my screen. So I'm hoping that everybody can see that on their own screens. I've made a certain assumption, which is that when you come to the 360carbon.org website, you will find your way to signing up. The process is designed to be as simple as possible. We gather very little information. All you need is your name and an email address, and then we send you a code which allows you to activate your account. Once you're activated, you'll stay logged in to the system for as long as you feel like staying logged in. If you don't log out, we'll assume you want to stay logged in. So the first time you ever come to 360 Carbon and you signed in, you'll get this quick start that you can see right up the top. This disappears after you've done the 4 steps that are required to get up and running. I've already completed the first step, which is to add a new group. All that is giving a group a name. A group is in effect a container for a whole group of people, but also for your church, the organization that you're working with. So once you've got your group, the next step is to add a new organization. Throughout the tool, you'll find information, explanations of what's going on. It'll either be little blue boxes sitting up the top, or you'll see pop-ups all over the place. Those will guide you, give you an idea of particularly what information you need to fill in as you come to do your footprints. We collect denomination information simply so to help you kind of locate yourselves within the system. For most denominations, it's just a case of putting in a postcode for where your main building or even a church office is, where you want to be located. For United Reform churches, we've got a hookup with the URC, which means you can type in your church name and we'll have a go at finding you and filling in the relevant details. And if you're Church of England, we make things even more complicated for you. Your church will have a 6-digit code. You can find this out by visiting the A Church Near You website and having a click around for your church in there. Once you've found your code, if you enter it in here and search, we can find where you are. You can also just name your church and put in a postcode. So I'm going to put in the postcode for the Climate Stewards office. And that will find your location and stick a pin in the map. This isn't, we don't need a lot of information from you. We've tried to keep things minimal so as not to have you clicking through GDPR stuff the whole time, but we do need to know where you are. Once you've set your location, the next option is to add buildings. When we first started talking about developing 360 Carbon, we assumed that churches would have a limited number of buildings. That assumption was very quickly turned upside down when someone said to us, our church has 9 buildings. Can we do 360 Carbon? So we had to think very quickly about that and decided to let you have unlimited numbers of buildings. I'm just going to add a church hall. And that means that well, this only really applies to energy, electricity, gas, etc., where you can record the energy for every building, presuming that you're on multiple meters. So once you've got your organization defined, you add it to the system, and we move on to the next step. As I mentioned, this is supposed to be a collaborative tool. The idea is that everyone can join in and take part. You can send invitations to up to 5 people. If you do need more, if you want to have a really huge group, then we can set you up individually to allow more people to get in contact with us. All you need to know is a name, an email address, and then you decide whether you want to make them an editor in the system, which just allows them to create footprints and fiddle around with a few bits, or if you want to make them an administrator, which gives them pretty much complete control over the group. We're not actually going to send any invitations at the moment, probably because I don't really have any friends. So we're going to go back to the dashboard, and 360 will think that we've actually completed that part of the task. And finally, the only thing that remains is to start your carbon footprint. One of the important things to think about when you are doing a carbon footprint for your church is what is going to be your baseline year. So a baseline, in effect, gives you something to compare with over time. So once you've set your baseline, everything you do after that will be compared back to that first year. One of the difficulties of last year was that churches didn't do very much. So we've been recommending to people that if they are going to do a baseline, or when they start a baseline, they actually start in 2019 if they can. If you only have information for 2020, it's still good to start there, but you'll probably find that this year, I was losing track of the years already, this year and the years after, your footprint might increase on what it was last year. So we'll crack on and we'll start straight in on the footprint. And this is where I'm going to call on Stefan, because Stefan is the one who has all the information for filling this in. So the aim of this section is to talk about your church. One of the things that we find getting mentioned is talking about sort of the size of the carbon footprint of the church. If you measure it year on year, you may find that actually your carbon footprint grows. It might not get smaller. You might do a lot to reduce your carbon footprint, and then find your carbon footprint is growing. And this is probably, hopefully, because your church is engaged with its community, is active, is bringing more people in, is making a difference in its community. So you're doing more, and generally speaking, if you do more, you'll be consuming more energy, there'll be more travel, you might be serving more tea and coffee, you might be spending more on church activities. So the aim behind this section is to allow you to fill in how your church is used, what people are doing in your church, so that when we get to the end of the whole process, you'll be able to have a footprint that tells you two measures. Your footprint by the number of people who come to your church, and your footprint by the amount of time that your church is being used, so that you can see that even if your footprint in the absolute grows over time, you might find that per person or per hour of usage, it's shrinking because you're making changes in how the church operates to reduce your carbon footprint, even as the numbers of people coming through the doors increases. So,
are you looking for me to give you a view on our church? I
want some numbers.
A little bit virtualized because we're still in work in progress on this in terms of buy-in. But so Sunday morning. So yeah, we probably have 100 people. There's probably up to if you include the winding up and winding down, probably 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours. Call it 3, and we'll do two. There's 2 morning and evening, so that's going to be times 52, 104.
Great. And then for special services?
Christmas and Easter, maybe 8. In total, maybe 250 people coming.
Yep.
I would say, and probably a couple of hours, something like that.
Yep. Okay, then how is your building used during the week?
Well, let's call the lunch club, the Bible study, probably something else as well. So let's call it 3 for about an hour for 39 weeks term time. Let's call it that.
Yep. And about how many people would be engaged in
maybe
those activities?
50.
50. Okay. And then do you have any staff
Two.
who are working?
Two
staff.
Vicar and curate. They're probably 20 hours.
Yep. And 39 weeks a year?
Yeah, probably. I wish they probably say, yeah.
Yeah.
Put 39 for now, yeah.
Okay. Now this section down at the bottom is free form. You can write what you like in here, but this is for your benefit. One of the things that's important with doing a carbon footprint is to be consistent over time. So when you start out, you're talking with your group, you'll have a think about, what do we want to record? What is our footprint? So you might want to include a mother and toddler group. And this is where everyone is going to see live how appalling my spelling is. So you've got a mother and toddler group. You mentioned a Bible study, yeah.
And it's the seniors lunch.
Seniors lunch. So by putting those in, that just gives you a reminder when you come back to your footprint, what you're including over and above just the kind of the general church services. And you also might want to say, actually, one of the things we don't want to count our church hall being used by other people. So you might want to say, excluding the scout group, because they might not be such a part of your identity as a church. There'll be different options, but okay. The aim is to be consistent over time.
Okay.
So if you start by doing the mothers and toddler group, the Bible study, and the seniors lunch, then next year you want to do the same, and the year after.
Sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll save that.
Yeah.
And we'll move on to the next section.
Okay.
Church and energy. So I
can't split church hall and main church building. Can I just do it all on the main church?
Yeah, you can do it on the main church. For now. That's not a problem.
Just to illustrate how it works. So electricity, 13,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
And then for the main heating, 47,000.
47,000. Are you using anything else like biomass, heating oil?
No.
Nope. And do you have any solar panels on your church?
No.
I will point out here that if you do have solar panels on your building, you can theoretically end up with a negative carbon footprint on 360. If you're on a 100% renewables tariff for your energy, that will be rated as 0.
They're not renewable, no. The thing that did shock me though, Adrian, was there's sort of like 60,000 kilowatt hours there. And I've just had an EPC done for my home, my home is 23,000. So like flip, you've got 100 people coming up all at 20,000. Actually, there's a massive sort of, there's the personal thing. It really brought it home to me as well. Anyway, keep going.
Cool. Once we've filled in all the numbers, we hit the calculate button. All of the tabs where you enter data about emissions have their own calculate tab, and that'll just give you a very quick feel for how big your carbon footprint is. So 15 and a quarter tons from energy. We'll save that.
Okay.
And then we'll head on to the next tab. So the travel tab, the aim here is to record both congregation and staff travel. Now, one thing to be aware of with congregation is that you might double count. if you've got people in your church who are already calculating their carbon footprint and potentially offsetting, then it's most likely that they'll have included their church travel, which includes coming to services, coming to activities during the week, that they'll have included that in their own carbon footprint. Now, in this case, we kind of decided, well, that's not too big a problem. People don't generally travel a huge amount for church, but also we want churches to be able to get an idea of their complete impact from all of their activities, from all the things that their people are doing. To make the most of the travel survey, you're going to have to talk to a whole bunch of other people, I'm afraid, Stefan. You'll have to go into church and you'll have to ask them what they do. Yeah,
I'm not doing that. No,
or you can do it via Zoom.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, that's a good opportunity. Yeah. No, so, I think our policy was it's really the direct pieces that we felt were important. You know, there's people have got to do their individual, but let's understand the church and the staff is really what we looked at. And we got a diesel and we got a petrol car, and one's at 150 the diesel, and the others at 100 a month.
Okie dokie. So that gives you for the whole year. That gives you 1 ton.
Okay.
I will point out, some of you will have noticed bicycles and on foot down in the bottom right hand corner here. Generally speaking, not high in emissions. Again, it's one of the things. Part of the journey for a church towards net zero is thinking about how they get around. So in the first year, you might only record a few miles on bicycle or on foot, but as you start thinking through how you want to reduce your carbon footprint, you might get more people saying, actually, I'm going to get on my bike or I'm going to walk to church, and you'll then start to see a trend of increasing mileage by bicycle or on foot. Okay, we'll save that and then move on. Okay, for the food and actually the tab that comes after expenditure, the kind of underlying theory here is that you can map kilograms of carbon to the amount that is spent on an item. And what we've done to try and to fill in this section is we've looked at average prices of things like tea and coffee as published by the government, and how that relates to the carbon footprint of the production of those items.
Okay.
It's not an exact science. So
let's stick it in.
Yeah, go for it.
So cups of tea a month, we reckon 200. Coffee's 400.
Yep.
Soft drinks, squash 50.
Okay.
Okay.
And do you serve any meals in your church?
Well, I haven't included. Let's not say any meals at the moment.
Okay.
But
can I ask a question?
Let's leave that. I don't know. Let's not. Can I suggest that we take those at the end and just go through that, unless it's really burning and critical? Is that okay? So let's keep the flow going, if you don't mind.
I will point out that there is a user guide that you can access at any point as you go through the system, and particularly for the food and for the expenditure, it has much more kind of explanation of what's going on there, how we've arrived at those numbers and what it means to enter like a slice of cake. So just a little aside, I think
okay.
Yeah, the slices of cake, we assumed that you've bought this from a supermarket and that you get an average of 8 slices of cake per cake. And everyone looks at me in complete horror because no one actually does that. So I actually recently had a conversation with a lady who told me that in their church they make their cakes, and we had a wonderful conversation about the different cakes that her church produces, everything from heavy fruit cakes to very, very luxurious chocolate cake, and they get 20 slices per cake.
You like to talk about cakes. Yeah,
yeah, the cakes are great. My comment was that, okay, you might get 20 slices of Trinity slices out the chocolate cake, but if people are having 2 or 3, you're back down to 8 anyway.
Okay.
Okay, 286 kilos of carbon for your food.
Okay. Oh yeah. Put us in for some cake and put us in for some biscuits. 8 packets of biscuits and 8 slices of cake. Let's do that. Let's just get some in there.
There we go, and we'll save that. Save that. Okay, expenditure. Again, this is based on relating amount spent to carbon emissions, and we've tried to identify kind of the categories that are typically used across a broad range of churches. So, how much have you been spending?
So, buildings probably 1,500 a month. 1,500. Postage 600.
Yep.
Printing 300. Magazines, books, hardly anything, 30.
Yep. Stationery
10. Accounting 600. Insurance 1,200. Courses couple hundred.
Yep. Okay, and we can calculate that, and that comes in at 3/4 of a ton. So we'll add that to your carbon footprint, and then move on to the last section, which is waste and water.
Right, so dry waste, probably 10 bags. Food, maybe 4.
Anything going out to landfill?
That shows my ignorance. I have to go and do some research on that. So maybe put half of it in there. It'll be the I don't know, maybe 5 of the rice recycled.
Yep. And then water,
120 cubic meters.
Yep. And then going out.
And then waste water 60.
So 408 kilos, and we'll pop that in. And then we move on to the summary, which will give you the total for your church. So at the top, you can see your absolute carbon footprint for the year. It'll tell you the period. One of the things I didn't particularly mention last time was you can set the month from when you start your carbon footprint. So if your church is running on an April to April budget, you might want to do your carbon footprint for the same period, because that just makes, particularly for things like expenditure, makes things just a little bit easier to keep track of. Once you start down a certain route, again, a bit of consistency, you'll need to carry on in the same way. And then we have a summary of the carbon footprint. You can look at the details if you so desire, and we have the breakdown on the right hand side.
So what I'm seeing there is that 85% is about energy.
Yes.
And the vast majority of energy was heating.
Yes. Yeah. And that's not unusual in the footprints that have been done so far in the system. That's a fairly typical breakdown of a church's carbon footprint.
Wow. But that gives you really some real thoughts about, where to spend the energy, literally.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time and aware that we're keen to get some opportunity for Q&A to happen. So maybe if you stop the screen share at this point. So I tell you what, the group I was in, let me put forward one of the key questions that came through. Well, there's 2 main things. One, what the flip do I do with a grade 1 listed building? And 2 was, well, can't we just buy offset gas and green gas and get it that way to reduce this issue? So Adrian, you're muted.
Yeah, grade 1 listed buildings, beautiful and really difficult to heat. The problem often is you can't actually do very much. You're limited by the terms of it being a grade 1 listed building. I think ultimately the thing is, don't feel too guilty about it. Do the things that you can do in the church, and that will obviously vary. from church to church, but find the things you can do within the limits of having a Grade 1 listed building. And then, sorry, what was the other question, Stefan?
The other question was really regarding offsetting. What should we just buy offset gas? And how can we?
Yeah, that's a legitimate option. The companies that are supplying green gas or biogas or anything from those sources, where they claim to be offsetting, they all have to prove that they're offsetting. They are doing it. So yeah, it's a legitimate way of reducing your carbon footprint is to buy in green gas. If you're looking at going on to a renewables tariff for your electricity for your church, then it takes a little bit more work because you have to shop around a bit to find out who's not greenwashing their electricity supply. There are some issues, or potentially some issues around certain suppliers covering up brown energy with what are called REGOs. So if you're looking for electricity supply, one of the things to look for is where what their fuel mix is and how they're supplying their energy. Right. But switching to renewables is definitely a legitimate way of reducing your carbon footprint. Yeah.
Well, can I suggest now we just open it up to some of the other groups from the floor? So yeah. If you have a question, can you stick your hand up and perhaps on the behalf of your group? Oh,
there's also quite a lot
visuals
of
on you.
questions maybe, in the chat as well.
Okay, I've got Lim and Evelyn. Why don't we ask you to unmute?
Yes, we have been using the 360 carbon calculator. One of the main issue we have is that if we put in all those activity not belong to the church activity, and we have quite a big carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Now, what is the purpose of this calculation? To some extent, it is to our credit to make the community use our building very well. But on the other hand, because of that, now we have a very big carbon footprint. The second question I have to ask you is that your energy, you did give some allowance or credit for having solar panel, is what we have. In fact, we also have ground heat pump. But in your survey, you didn't give us any credit at all. Thirdly, we have a rainwater harvesting system. We save 70,000 liters of tap water every year. We have no credit at all.
So, Adrian, what are you doing about this?
Well, for the rainwater harvesting and things like that, we're always open to suggestions for new things to add. One of the things we became very conscious of very early on is we have limited. We only know our own churches, so the more people who tell us things and tell us how the tool should work for them, we'll change it, we'll update it, we'll add new things. And Lim, your point about having more people coming through the building and the footprint going up, it's a great problem to have. That was why we included the section on the church as the number of people, so that you could end up with an average carbon footprint per person, and that's probably one of the key things to look at when you're looking at your carbon footprint. It's not the total, it's what's your carbon footprint per person, because that will give you a good idea of how your church is operating and how its carbon footprint relates to what you're actually doing. And I think you'll find that as you do things like your rainwater harvesting and things like that, your footprint will fall, and where it'll be reflected most is in the carbon footprint per person.
Good.
Yeah, when you mentioned about
could I suggest, so we just open up the questions to others as well, and if you have specifics, I think Adrian, you should just stick if you don't mind putting your email in the chat, people can pick up, and I know you love following on with people afterwards. So any more specifics that people would like to bring to Adrian?
Can I draw attention to one of the questions in the chat about how this fits in with the C of E diocesan return?
Yep. Okay, we have a link to the energy footprinting tool, which means that if, when you set up your organization, you put in your 6-digit church code, when you get to the energy section, we will try and pull your information out of the EFT and put it into 360 Carbon. If you're a church with only one building and you've filled in the parish return for just one building, then we'll pull it straight into the energy section. If in 360 Carbon you set up multiple buildings, or you've got multiple buildings in your parish return, then there's an extra step to go through, which is to map basically the EFT to 360 Carbon and decide where you want the energy to go. So we can pull that in and hopefully save you typing.
Okay, right. Who else have we got?
We had a couple of questions here. There's one about from Sandy and Jeff. Looks like the Creation Care household tool. Yes, it very much does. We're actually talking with Creation Care at the moment and seeing how there might be ways of working together, because we were sent a link to the tool a while back, and we think it's absolutely brilliant. So Creation Care, along with Eco Church, 360, we want to work together and produce something that's going to be a real service to the church. The second point there was, does it include church maintenance? That would pretty much come under building and grounds, the first option in the expenditure. Yeah. Reducing heating without having a cold church that no one will come to. That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer to that.
One of the things that I've heard said, this is partly certainly extended through the Church of England net zero carbon program, is you actually try and aim to heat the people, not the space.
Right, that's brilliant.
So you have your heating at pew level rather than trying to heat the whole of a massive building.
That's great, thank you. Dan has asked, is there any normalization to compare year on year? No, I'm afraid we haven't. We did look at using degree days. The problem with it is the data is too broad for use in a tool like ours, which is focused on one point. I would happily get into a very long discussion with you, Dan, on normalization and degree days, and then everyone else's eyes will glaze over in the meantime. But yeah, get in touch and we can have a chat about that. Louise has asked if there are any ideas to reduce the footprint on the website. I'm afraid that definitely falls into the coming soon category. We're working on it. We're having a big overhaul at Climate Stewards at the moment, where we're working out how we can get good quality resources up onto the website and onto 360 Carbon that will be without redoing some of the fantastic work that other people have been doing. So coming soon.
If you don't mind me saying, Adrian, I think one of the key things that has really been excited about with Climate Stewards is not that you're just offsetting, but you're helping people to reduce, and this is what the tool does. And when we looked at our church, you talked about biomass and how that would really help to reduce the impact of that. But also, what I was really excited about is how you offset, because you're not monoculture kind of. This is a massive story in Climate Stewards. I think I really should ask you to share.
Yeah, yeah. Climate Stewards. When we started out, we first worked with A Rocha Ghana, and I don't know how many of you will have come across A Rocha. A Rocha is Christians in Conservation, been around for a good long time. Our first ever project was with A Rocha Ghana, starting in 2007, planting trees around Kumasi, and then
But the key is it's you're creating jobs. It's like making difference. You're actually investing in the communities to make a difference. It's not just bulking up.
No. And one of the things we've done in the last, I think probably the last 5 years, is we've developed what we call our seal of approval, which is a way that we can develop new carbon offsetting projects with partners in the developing world. The aim being to get funding to projects that would normally not receive funding because they're too small. A lot of organizations who want to do offsetting look for accredited offsets, and to get accreditation for a project costs tens of thousands of pounds. So we developed a way of doing good verifiable projects so that we can be confident of the carbon offsets being produced, but at a good price, so that more money goes to the community. So we have tree planting projects in Kenya, in Uganda, and we also do something called biosand water filters, which reduce the consumption of firewood for families. So that saves them money, but also produces carbon offsets. We do that in Uganda. And we've now got 9 partners across the globe with 18 different projects that we're running, that we're funding.
So it's a bit like a tree aid to me. It's, you know, it's making a difference to people's lives.
Yeah.
And at the same time, offsetting that part of, you know, if I go to Ryanair, I can offset my flight for £1, but it's a con. And this is really solidly backed up, that makes a difference in the third world. That's what I love about you guys, and keep going, do what you're doing. I'm looking at the time. Should we have one last question before we finish, and then we can let people go? And I suggest, if you don't mind, Adrian, we just let a bit of chat, just informal discussion continue.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay around.
And let people to go if they need to go. So any last questions? So is that Paul? Oh, no, who was that?
Okay, Anne, dying to come in on one thing.
Come for it, Anne, yeah.
Climate Sunday has really, really kick-started things within my church again.
Fantastic.
And one of the things is that you work towards a declaration of climate emergency in your church, involving as many people as possible, as many structures within the church. People understand what is going on, and you write a plan. So it's actually kickstart me to do all this stuff on zero carbon and the footprint and blah, 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 which I would quite happily have skipped until I said, okay, so what are we going to put in front of the church? What are we going to say by way of a plan? And it's for 2021 leading up to COP, and it's got a lot of, it's very well done. It's got a lot of momentum to it, good resources.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you so much for that, Anne. Adrian, any final comments before we let people go who want to?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you for coming along. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for thinking about these issues. As I mentioned right at the beginning, when I was a pastor, I didn't do this, to my regret. But to see in front of me on here, in fact, kind of have to scroll to the right a few pages to see everybody, to know that there's people in churches getting involved, thinking about their carbon footprint and actually doing something about it and working together, it's a real encouragement, and really grateful to have been able to be part of this tonight. Thank you.